Did you see the GTA 5 on the PS5?
That game's never gonna die.
Well, I just saw this.
How many are we expecting, Mike?
We should be in the 60s.
I feel like I'm in the 60s right now.
Oh, you want to listen to some Elvis or something?
No, I feel like that's my age right now.
I don't. You just got tired. It was a long week.
Dude, I don't know
Going
if
to
it's
the
just,
office every day.
I know I had to wake up, put a suit on again, which, by the way, I'm going suit shopping after this. Very exciting. Lawyer life right there. I can't remember that we didn't have any of the case file samples for this week. It was just all your homework problems, right?
Yeah.
Who?
I'm excited to see how they were interpreted. Because I did not like the way you interpreted them.
Say that one more time.
I said I'm excited to see how everyone interpreted the questions.
Because you didn't like how I interpreted it?
Yeah. I just take shots at you whenever I can.
Okay, that's mean. I'm not ready for this kind of criticism yet this morning.
What?
Did you guys see the scores from the handouts?
I saw that there were scores. I didn't look. I was
They look like pretty consistent. I gotta ask Katya which of the answers were which of the questions that were incorrect, but it looks like it was pretty consistent. Everybody missed about 3 or 4. And so I'm wondering if they were pretty much those questions were the incorrect ones were almost pretty much the same ones. So, Oscar. She's not on yet, is she?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. When you were looking at it, is it pretty consistent? Were they missing the same ones, Katya?
Yes. A lot of it was number 7, 13, 22. Yeah.
I'll take a look. Said 7, 13, and 22.
You're talking about the outline, right?
We're talking about the handout for
Yes.
For week
The handout.
Week
For
1
week
or
2.
week 2?
Week 2.
Week
Okay.
2.
Cool beans.
Was it week 1, Katya, or week 2? It should have been week 1, right?
Week 2.
Week 2.
The criminal one. With all the criminals.
And then were we still missing 13,
Yes.
Katya? So we
Yeah,
just gotta
it looks like we're gonna. I know we're for sure missing 5 that already asked for it, but I got some text messages, so I think 2 more are gonna be absent.
we just got to make sure they turn in their homework on time.
Yeah.
We lost one. Wasn't it 57?
Katya, do we have any absences today?
Yes, we have 5 planned, and then I have 2 that just texted me that are gonna be absent.
So a total of 7. So
Yes.
that would put us in the 60s. So I think we pretty much got everyone.
Okay. Did you look at Mike? Did you look at the outline to see which ones?
I'm pulling it up right now.
Question handouts. That's what you guys call them, right?
So 7, you said 7, 13, and 22?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to go over them, Felicia, or do you want to just kick into that?
Those are the outline questions, right?
Right.
So let's do that real quick so that we can answer those burning questions, and then we'll go over the homework.
I have them up. Do you want me to do that? Or do you have them up in front of you?
Go ahead.
Since it was your video.
If you have them, then do it.
Okay. All right, everyone. Good morning. Hello.
Good morning.
Welcome to week number 2 for the summer course. Hope everyone's having a good week so far. Katya sent us the scores, and it looks like you guys, most people had some issues with 3 of the questions on the outline. So we're going to go over them real quick. And if anyone's got any questions, we will answer them for you. And since Lexi wrote these while we were doing the videos, I'm going to let her answer them for you guys, and then we can discuss them. So take it away, Lexi.
Okay, I have to scoot into camera. Tight.
Oh, you are there.
I am there. I just am hanging out off camera.
She doesn't want to use her computer too, so we're sharing. We're being an adorable couple.
Yeah, so we don't get really bad feedback when people talk. So I'm going to go over 7, 13, and 22 on the video handout. If you guys have specific questions on questions that aren't 7, 13, or 22, put them in chat, and I will also go over those. So if you guys want to pull up your video handout, make sure you're on mute too. Make sure you guys mute yourselves so you don't get any feedback from anyone. Number 7 asks what type of crimes are complete when the plan is finished, and then what type of crimes are done when someone tried to commit the crime, but they didn't complete the crime. So a conspiracy is a crime when the planning is complete. There doesn't need to be an action taken. It just needs to have the plan done. That is a conspiracy, and that is a criminal act. And then crimes where someone attempted to do the crime, I just gave the answer there. Attempted crimes are done when someone actually didn't act for part of the crime, but didn't complete it. So if I want to murder Mike because we've been in quarantine for too long and I got sick of him, and I take a gun and I fire it at him, but I miss, that's an attempt. Whereas a conspiracy would be if Mike and I planned to murder Felicia and we had the plan laid out and everything, that's a conspiracy.
Also, for attempt crimes, it's the official term is you have to take a substantial step towards that crime. So if, same scenario, let's say Lexi and Felicia are committing a conspiracy to murder me, and they're at the front door and someone stops them, then there's an argument that they've taken a substantial step. They showed up with a weapon, but then someone interfered with them actually shooting me and killing me. That would be also considered an attempt. You don't need to necessarily fire the bullet or fire the gun and miss. If you take enough of a step towards that crime, it's considered an attempt crime.
All right, that's 7. 13 asks what type of intent is when a person disregards the consequences of their actions, and that could lead to a crime. That is reckless intent. So if you decide to drive the wrong way down the 95, you know it's dangerous, you know it could cause a car wreck or cause other people to run into other cars, that is reckless intent. You know it's dangerous and you do it anyway. Does anyone want to add anything to that? Mike, Felicia?
No.
That is not malice. Mike can answer that. Oh, I thought you were typing out an answer. I'm sorry.
Nope.
Malice means you have what the common law called an evil intent. I'm trying to think of how to explain that.
Honestly, Felicia, you might be better.
Yeah.
You might be better at explaining that because you've been a criminal DA and I haven't.
Malice, it is what it sounds like. It's the evil intent. It's the intent to do something wrong. It's that mens rea piece that it wasn't that I came over to show Mike my gun and I accidentally fired it. It was I came there with malice, that it wasn't a mistake, that I had an intent to do it. That's malice. I thought about it before I did it and decided it was a good idea. And it's a bad-
One way that I used to help when I was in school is you think, malice is the word they use, but think of malicious. It's malicious intent. That's not the legal term, but that might help you kind of analogize it, get you in that mind frame. Does that sound about fair, Felicia?
Sure. You can always define a word by using a variant of that word. So you can definitely define malice as malicious intent.
No, the answer is reckless, Nusha.
So the difference there is when you have a reckless intent, you just intend to do something stupid, like driving the wrong way down the highway or showing someone a gun with the safety off. You know that something dangerous or bad could happen, something criminal could happen, but you just don't care. Whereas malicious intent, like Felicia was saying, you intend to do the bad act. You intend to run into this car. You intend to shoot your gun at somebody. That's the difference between reckless intent and then malicious intent. And then, was it 22 or 23? 22?
I believe it was 22.
All right. 22 asks, criminal procedure heavily involves an accused what? It heavily involves the accused's constitutional rights, or if you put due process, that would also be a correct answer. So criminal procedure focuses on the defendant's Fourth Amendment rights, Fifth Amendment rights, and Sixth Amendment rights specifically. So those are their constitutional rights in a trial. This is stuff like your right to a trial by jury, your double jeopardy clause, you can't be tried for the same crime twice, your right to a speedy trial. So criminal procedure involves those constitutional rights. Does anyone else have any other questions on the video handout? You can type them. Was transformation an answer for any of them? I don't believe so. I think that was stuff from the week 1 handout. Number 23. All right. The basis of all criminal procedure is that the defendant is innocent until proven guilty. Those are those 3 blanks. So the defendant is innocent until proven guilty. We don't presume guilt for anyone.
Except me, apparently, who's been the victim of all these murders. 23. Oh, go ahead, Felicia.
Oh no, I was just going to ask you, what were you guilty of? Is that why you keep getting brought up?
Apparently
Guilty.
being friends with you people.
Being a great fiance. All right, 18, 15, 14. I will do those in order. All right, so 18, self-defense requires that the defense show that what kind of person would have acted the same way, and I should have put the same way as the defendant. Self-defense requires the defense to show that a reasonable person would have acted the same way as the defendant did. So the test for self-defense is whether a reasonable person would have done it. Yep, Jocelyn, that's right. Reasonable is the blank there on 18. 15 asks, what kind of intent exists when a person doesn't intend any harm, but there's still a risk in their actions? That's constructive intent. And maybe Felicia can explain that a little bit more in detail, since she did the video.
Since I created the video?
Yeah, since I took that straight from you.
Right. constructive intent is kind of, when we talked about constructive possession, it relates back to that. And that's kind of where there's situations where you didn't intend any particular harm. So it's not the malice. It's not, I'm going to come in and shoot you and kill you. But there's actions of a high risk injury. So you could be liable. It's really very close to reckless. It's the driving drunk, the same thing where you're taking a risk and you're doing some criminal behavior with it. So if driving the wrong way on the 95 was illegal, there was a law that says you cannot do that, that would be the constructive intent because there's a law against it. If you're just doing something incredibly reckless, but maybe there's no specific law against it, then you would fall into that reckless category where you're driving. I don't even know if there's a law saying you can't drive. I think it's just reckless driving. So it's not specific about what you're doing, whereas drunk driving is specifically prohibited by law. Does that help? Transferred intent, you want to know the difference between constructive intent and transferred intent. So transferred intent is when you do actually have an intent for some, oh, okay, never mind.
Sorry.
Mike just pushed enter when you started doing that, when you started going into that explanation.
I was trying to cut down on time on this because I know we're going to be spending a lot of time on the other homework questions. So I was trying to help you.
All right.
Okay, well then I'll be quiet.
All right.
No, you're fine. Actually, you know what? That's a very good example. Why don't we do this? We can still go over some of these, but I want to make sure we have enough time for the 20 questions because there's a lot more than just going over those. So I'm going to use this as a good segue, and I'm going to have Felicia help me on this one too. So we're going to start using. You guys are going to start using your brain. So I hope you've had your coffee. So let's just say the scenario I just put in into. About the transferred intent. Let's say Lexi and Felicia show up to my house to murder me. And they, for some reason, they decide to have one person in front of me and one person behind me. And Lexi tries to shoot me to kill me, but hits and kills Felicia instead. So, do we have one crime here, or one charge, or two? Okay, Mitch, why don't you unmute yourself and tell me what the charges are? You were first. Okay, is it intent murder or is it something else? Melissa's correct. So it would be attempted murder against me, and then actual, because the intent transfers, even though she technically didn't mean to shoot and kill Felicia, that intent would transfer, and she would be convicted of murdering Felicia. Or sorry, she would be guilty of murdering Felicia. So we would have two charges. So that's good answers, everyone. So now that and that's a good example of transferred intent, and then that's a good way to just start thinking about, when you look at a fact pattern, there's not necessarily always one charge, or there's not always one crime. There's multiple things. So, and that's how, hopefully, when you started looking at the homework questions, you kind of used your brains a little bit and started thinking, okay, what else is in this? Because that's essentially what cases are, is looking at it and not just looking at the one thing. What else can you find? So with that, Felicia, I teed you up.
No, I want to answer Assis really quick. You could throw in a conspiracy in there because we had the plan to kill Mike. We showed up at the house, we positioned ourselves, and the gun was fired. So you're right. You could add a third conspiracy to commit.
And I'm just going to add on to, sorry, Felicia, I didn't mean to cut you
Go
off.
ahead.
I don't know if this is covered in the statutes that you gave them, but I just want to emphasize that conspiracy will always be its separate crime. Whereas attempt, if you attempt a crime, but then you actually complete it, the attempt is merged into the actual crime. So if I try and shoot Mike and I miss, but then I shoot him again and I don't miss and I actually kill him, sorry, babe. There's not two separate crimes there. There's no attempted murder for the first one and then murder on the second one. That's just one crime. But conspiracy will always be a separate charge.
Right, because the conspiracy, and we did go over this in the video.
Okay.
Conspiracy is complete when you completed and did the first act towards it. And yes, you do have to work with someone else for a conspiracy. You cannot conspire by yourself. There has to be a plan hatched among 2 or more people. So let me go, speaking of conspiracy, we can segue right into that first question with Jasmine and Zeke. There was a question over the Discord about whether or not Fabian's house was left open. And in my view, I liked Lexi's answer, so I didn't add to it. But I'm going to say the door was shut but not locked. Wait, why can't you do it why can't you conspire by yourself? Because you have to make because a conspiracy requires 2 or more people. You cannot conspire by yourself.
Despite my best.
Yes, if you planned it out by yourself, you would just be premeditated. You would just have your malice aforethought. Yes. No, that's fine. That's what we're here for, is to learn everything, so that the whole idea of teaching is that it's something you may have known a little bit about or may not have known. And that that's how we know this stuff, is because it was taught to us. So it's good to know. So when you guys are looking at trial by peer cases, unless you have co-defendants, which are rare, you should probably never have a conspiracy problem. So, okay. So and what Lexi just said about attempts kind of merge in. So if it took more than one attempt to kill someone, that's all just inside the murder. The same thing happens with solicitation, which is kind of giving you the answer here. But so I'm going to review the question really quick. So Jasmine wants Fabian's stereo. So she kind of tricks Zeke into going to get the stereo by because it did say the back door would be kept unlocked. So unknown to Zeke, Jasmine was lying and she wanted the stereo. So then she comes clean and says, "This isn't my stereo, it belongs to Fabian." So then he takes the stereo to his apartment, intending to return it, did not report the incident to police, and the next day he decided to keep it. So what is Jasmine guilty of? Does anyone want to take a stab at it before I give you the answer? Anyone have a guess? So there's a couple of C's. So how about if I tell you that when she got him to do it, when he completed it, that ended the solicitations, that ended the attempt. So that narrows you down to A and D. Oh, look at all the right answers. It is A, and I'll tell you why. Because that attempt, that solicitation, merged into the crime when he actually went into the house and got it. So there is the burglary, because burglary is not like we're thinking of breaking and entering. Opening the door is enough to consider the unlawful entry. When the statute I gave you talks about going into someone's house, entering, it doesn't necessarily say breaking. That's why the burglary is in there. And then larceny for stealing the stereo. So you guys did really well on that one, to think that one through. I just wanted to give you an idea that when we talked about attempts versus conspiracies there. Okay. So go ahead with Mitch. What's your question about why is she legally guilty of what? Wait, hold on. Even if she herself did not break in, she would return. Yes, because she got him to do it. because of it merged in but for Jasmine's actions, Zeke would have never gone into Fabian's house and gotten that stereo. So when she solicited him to do it and then it was completed, she's just as guilty of that crime. So think of it if those really popular murders where like the husband and wife don't get along, but they don't want to get a divorce. So the wife gets her boyfriend to kill her husband. Have anyone seen any of that on Lifetime television? That is the same idea, is that that she's soliciting or inducing the boyfriend to kill her husband so she can be free of him and they can be together forever and is totally happy because that always works out. So all sarcasm aside, that's the idea, that if you are like the criminal mastermind that makes something happen, then you are just as guilty when it happens as the person who did it. So if you attempt to kill someone and end up killing the person you're conspiring with, will you get charged with the first degree? Can Zeke be charged with selling a stolen? Did Zeke sell it? He kept it in his apartment, but if he decides to sell it, yes, he can be charged with selling a stolen item. If he had called 911, would he still be guilty? So, Angel, that's a really good question right there. If that last part of it, the next day, he did not report the incident to police, and the next day he decided to keep the stereo, that changes the game a lot, because up to that point, Zeke did not have any intent to commit any crime. He was being duped by Jasmine, right? And then he decides to keep the stereo. That is when his larceny is complete. So if he had if he had reported it, stopped it, and said, oh my gosh, I didn't know I was using this way, I was told this was all permissible, then he never had the intent to do any of those crimes. He didn't commit the crime. This is different from trespassing. Burglary and trespassing are different. And your guys, this is actually a really good question, because you'll deal with trespassing a lot in Trial by Peers, or at least we used to. It comes up every now and again still. In order for trespass, you have to be what's called trespassed first. So say you're at, let me just think of one, like the mall. Say you've been to the mall and they think you're a sketchy person and you don't have any money, so you're not buying anything, and maybe you're in the parking lot skateboarding or something. You'll get what's called trespass, which is a warning. And then it kind of goes in your record that you've been warned that you cannot skateboard in the parking lot of the mall, okay? After you have that warning, if you show up with your skateboard without any intention of going shopping in the mall and just skateboarding, or if they catch you skateboarding around, then you are guilty of trespassing. That's different than burglary, because burglary is entering that dwelling of another with the intent to commit a felony therein, where trespassing is just you were on private property, you've told not to go there, you've been warned, and then you return. That's what trespassing is. And so Annika asks, if he returns the stereo to Fabian but does not report it to the police, could he still be charged for not reporting it? If he returns it to Fabian and doesn't tell anybody, then he still doesn't have that intent piece. That was the idea, is that they gave you that whole long paragraph and didn't give you Zeke's intent until the very last few words, where he decided to keep it. If he had returned it and said, hey, don't use me for your nefarious deals anymore, then he didn't have any intent, he didn't do it.
So Felicia, I have a question. What happens if instead of Fabian being told to go in through the back door, what if he was told the stereo is sitting on a coffee table that's next to an open window, and that's all he has to do is reach in? That's not burglary, is it?
Yes, because you've entered. The statute says you entered.
So I don't need to
Your
open
whole
the
body
door?
needs to enter. Your arm entered. You entered long enough to, I don't know how much of you needs to reach in to that coffee table where you keep your stereos next to the open window. But if you go all the way, if you go in enough to take something out and you intended, then that would be the burglary. So you have to have the intent and the entering.
So I asked that question just to illustrate to you guys, you don't need to actually forcibly enter or unforcibly enter or open a door. As soon as you stick your hand in somewhere with the intent to steal, even if you don't steal it, that you are technically guilty of burglary. So make sure when you're reading these statutes, you want to make sure you're really reading all of the words, so you're aware of, because statutes, the phrase is statutory interpretation. So you want to make sure you're reading that correctly to know what to actually charge with them. I'm seeing a lot of the questions, about different types of crimes. Can you be charged with this? Can you be charged with that? You need to look at it and analyze the statute and really think about it. So for instance, I had a question I answered in chat about, a murder. Well, you tell me, if you've got two co-conspirators and co-conspirator 1 kills co-conspirator 2 after the crime's over, if you think you can meet that burden of first degree, then you can absolutely charge first degree. So reading these statutes and comprehending them is the answer to these questions, essentially, because you want to make sure you know what's going on.
Okay, so number 2 was Davis is a 17-year-old dropout who lives in Oakland, and he's part of the Raiders. And so this is important for us because the Raiders are coming here, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's why I thought it was funny. No, it's not? Okay.
I just don't like the Raiders.
I don't.
So this is look out for 17-year-old dropouts who like the Raiders. Anyways, Parcells is a guy who belongs to the Jets, and he's a rival gang. So Davis accosted him. So he acts first, push him to the ground, pulls out the knife, says, "Who gave you permission to come into our turf?" And while he's got him down with the knife out, one of his friends, also a Raider, comes up and asks what's going on. That's Simpson. Simpson finds out that Parcells belongs to the other gang. You really want to know, Mitch, what does turf mean? That is the area that, there you go. It's their territory. You guys already know. Okay, good. So what happens to rival gangs who come looking for trouble, and then the 17-year-old dropout, Davis, stabs the guy in the throat that he's holding down and kills him. So obviously Davis is a murderer. So what is Simpson guilty of? Is he a murderer as well? And why? And this is kind of why the why is so important. So all the answers show guilty. So what do you guys think it is? So what if I tell you that this is the accomplice liability, right? So this is looking at it as what is he guilty for as being a part of it? And if I tell you that the accomplice must have the specific intent for the crime to be committed, that fits here. It's a specific intent. And the accomplice must aid, abet, or encourage the person for the commission of the attempted attempted commission of the crime. So those two are, you're right, those two are met with A, because he encouraged him by saying, "Why don't you show him what happens?" And he had the specific intent to say, "Who come to Oakland looking for trouble." So the answer is A, because because encouragement is enough. That's an accomplice, is someone who has the specific intent to help, and encouragement is enough. So you're an accomplice if I tell Lexi I want to murder Mike, but I don't have a car right now and I need a ride over to the house. I'm sorry, Mike, these just keep fitting. And so she comes and picks me up and drives me over to his house. She's now aided me to get there. Okay. It's not but for, I could have walked, but she did aid me. Everyone feels bad for Mike. Okay. So that is an accomplice. So all you need to do is aid, encourage. Okay. And then your accomplices. So that you can get that through the words of encouragement. I wanted to make sure that you guys saw that piece of it. So yes, he is an accomplice. He would be charged with murder. It is A because he is the accomplice. Yes. And he's guilty of it because the poor guy died. So let's look at, and now this one is one we've actually kind of mentioned before. So Siri, let me answer your question really quick. B is a little bit different because that says that but for, that has a but for clause in it, that Davis would not have stabbed Parcels but for Simpson's words of encouragement. We don't have those facts specifically because Davis on his own knocked the guy down, pinned him, pulled the knife out. So I'm not 100% sure that given the facts that we have, that he would have done it. He wouldn't have done it but for those words of encouragement. He might have done it anyway. So you can't rule that in. And you don't need the but for encouragement. So in my Mike story, if Lexi gave me a ride over the house, she is my accomplice, but it's not enough to say, but for that ride in the car, I wouldn't have done it because I could have always walked or found another transportation. Does that make sense? So you don't need the but for him encouraging it. You don't need, that's a little bit stronger than what you need. That's the important difference, is that you just need to aid, encourage, or abet. It doesn't need to be the deciding factor of whether or not the crime happens. Okay. Okay, so number 3 is the one we talked about before. It's just a little bit different. So, and I love the scenery they give you. One afternoon, Ralph was driving his car on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles, and he's very important man, and he's busy, right? And he's late. So he's getting upset because of traffic. We all know how that's like. And so he decides to drive down the sidewalk to avoid traffic jams. It's very similar to driving down the wrong side of the road. While speeding down the sidewalk, pedestrians are jumping out of his way. He strikes Amy and kills her. What kind of, what's the best theory? So which one is he guilty of for criminal liability? So which intent is it? Felony murder we haven't really talked about, but that's committing an assault with a deadly weapon and someone dies. So this one, transferred intent, we talked about that already. We know that's not it. Intentional killing because Ralph's conduct was a substantial factor in causing Amy's death, or commission of an act highly dangerous to life without intent to kill with disregard of the consequences. And it looks like I see all D's. So you got that one right. That's absolutely right. That's absolutely the firing the gun in the room. That's absolutely doing something so dangerous with disregard for people's lives, that if you thought you could drive down the sidewalk without hitting anybody and killing them, then obviously you're guilty of the murder. Okay. Yes, that's right, Juan. It's the reckless disregard, and it's like significantly reckless. It's not just doing something reckless, like speeding is considered reckless. It's doing something with high disregard. So it's a step up. I believe in the video I used the example of shooting into a room to get someone's attention. Well, that's high disregard. Lexi gave you earlier today the driving down the wrong side of the freeway, high disregard. So driving on the sidewalk is also an example of high disregard. So you guys did really good. Good job. All right, so question 4. Now this one examines battery. So I just gave you the answer. So it's Jimmy and Chrissy are playing tennis because they're great tennis players, and they go into the bar and he's like, let me show you how to do my tennis. And he's swinging it around. Now look at what they tell you. They say that he begins to swing his racket carelessly. So he's not being careful. He's not being like, this is how you do it. He's swinging it around carelessly. And he hits Ivan in the mouth. So what is Jimmy guilty of? So he's guilty of battery. It's B. Why? Because battery is very simply defined, and I gave you guys that statute. And if you need it, it's right, it's in that handout right at the end. It simply says battery means any willful unlawful use of force or violence upon the person of another. So that's it's a general intent crime. And when we were looking at intents, it actually gives that example right there, example of general intent crime, battery. So that's when they're going to give you the credit for being knowing when you have general intent crime. So that is if you're swinging your racket all around and you hit someone. What's the difference between assault and battery? Good question, because I feel like those get kind of mixed up. At common law, so in the olden days, assault was making someone scared and battery was actually hitting them. We have changed it a bit, most notably in crimes involving sexual assault. It would be a battery. Sometimes people do call it battery, sexual battery, but that's like the rape charges. But they sometimes are considered under our law sexual assaults. But at the base, when you're looking at the difference between assault and battery, assault is like if I pinned you against the wall and I made you scared and I'm raising my fist and I come right up to the end and then I don't hit you. I still committed an assault. So then the battery, that's the difference between assault and battery, is that you don't actually hit anyone with the battery. Okay. So that's battery, general intent. So just know that when you're running, you don't need the specific intent. You don't need to be doing something. So it's not mayhem because he's not running around doing mayhem is kind of like out in the public area. Whoa, there, never mind. Someone gave you the whole definition of mayhem. Okay, so I'm just gonna go to the next question then, because then that kind of goes into more of an examination of general intent. And that's assumed for the purposes of this question only that before Jimmy began to swing his racket at the bar, he had 3 martinis, vodka martinis, and he was totally inebriated. And what this question is asking you is, could his intoxication negate his intent? So could the fact that he was drunk negate it? Martinis are vodka and vermouth. It's heavy alcohol. So it's supposed to give you the idea that he's drunk. I don't like martinis either, Mitch. So look, you guys looked at all those B's. Look at that. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Recklessness cannot be negated by intoxication. So that's great. You guys are picking that up really well. But I wanted you guys to think about kind of the intents that we went over and how they apply, and looking at each little element, like Mike was saying earlier, to see if you meet it or not is also very, very important. And with that, meeting or not, even the slightest thing, is number 6. I'm going to go into Olga goes to lunch with her boss, and the boss's wallet falls out of the purse accidentally, but then Olga's like, ooh, boss wallet, and sticks it in her purse. And it's important to note, intending to steal it, Olga picked up the wallet and placed it into her purse. Okay. But then she has a change of heart. And I see a lot of A's, no crime. And when you go back and look at our larceny, it does indicate carried away. So the difference between the A and the B answer here, either A, no crime, or B, larceny, is whether or not you consider her taking the wallet and putting it into her purse, which it hides it from plain view of everything. Okay. Then is that enough of a carrying away, or do you actually think that she needs to get up and walk away from the table from it? That is the difference in number 6. If you think that putting it into the purse is carrying it away from where it was, then it's a larceny. If you think that it is not enough to put it in your purse to carry it away, then it's a no crime. And this is an illustration to show you that you could be charged with larceny because putting it away in your purse could be considered carrying it away. But this is one that I picked specifically because there's a very strong argument that it's also no crime. And that's one of those where the lawyer brain comes in and you want to argue it both ways. Okay. Any questions on the carrying away versus no crime? Nicole, interesting question. Which is the more correct one? And so if you were on a bar prep exam or a legal test, it would be the larceny, because putting it away in her purse is considered carrying it away. But I chose it specifically because there's also a strong argument that she didn't commit a crime because she didn't get up from the table. So that opens up a defense argument. But technically the answer is that she did commit the larceny when she put the wallet in her purse, because that was carrying it away from where it was. The tiniest little act. So that, with that, let's do if you guys want to do number 7. This is a big love affair fight about an affair. And I picked this one because of another little piece of the definition of a statute. So Armando was arrested and charged with burglary. Who wants to take a stab at what the answer is? Is he guilty or not? Okay, I'm getting a good sampling. And then you get the feeling he's guilty of something, right? And the most I'm seeing is B and C. But he is not guilty of burglary, guys. And why? The answer is C, because there was no breaking into the dwelling of another. Because even though it was Angelina's house, he lived there with her. It's not the dwelling of another. That's the difference between arson and burglary. Okay, because burglary can you have to go into the dwelling of another or the boat of another. There's a bunch of different things that you could do, but it's because he lived in that house. It was his house. He wasn't even though it was the garage, he's not guilty of burglary because it's not something else. So that leads us to 8. What is he guilty of? Because I didn't want to just leave it at, oh, you're completely not guilty. No, you are guilty of something. You're right, Victoria. It's the attempted arson is what he's actually guilty of, because that does not require going into the house of another. So good job. Good job, you guys. Well, vandalism, go back and look at the statute for the difference between attempt arson and vandalism. In a minute. Yeah. Okay. So questions 8 and 9. Another great story of two people maybe working together, maybe not. This one is Mona Lisa and her partner Reba. It's important to know that Mona Lisa works in a women's lingerie section, and she usually works 10 to 6. One evening, her girlfriend comes over, and they were going to go out to dinner. That's all nice.
Felicia, you
Yes.
skipped number 9.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was reading, I'm like, where is that?
I did. I'm sorry. This is, yeah, this is another good one, right? This is the one they've been dating. I love these. And then Inca saw Eli. Is it Eli? I'm going
Yeah.
to call him Eli. Eli, the kisser of another woman, and passionately embracing her. So you know what happens when your girlfriend catches you kissing on another girl? This is another intoxication question, because after guzzling down a couple of beers, so we got alcohol. Sorry, I skipped that one, because it's kind of funny. She starts conversing with Raven, another customer, and the two women began commiserating about their unfaithful boyfriends, because I guess Raven also has an unfaithful boyfriend. Then they move on to tequila shots. So they soon become intoxicated and come up with ways of getting back at Eli. And then Raven says, let's set fire to his home, because that's what you should do. Okay. I get a lot of B, guilty because of voluntary intoxications, no defense, since she knew she was setting fire to the dwelling of a house of another. And you guys are absolutely right. It's another one where that's the malicious burning of the dwelling house of another. So the charring counts, because it does say in our statute even charring. And that's a general intent crime, just like battery, because she knew what she was doing. So yes, the answer is B. Good job, guys. And now we're ready for the diamond necklace theft at the jewelry store. That one, okay, as I read through them, I pick out the most important parts. So Mona Lisa serendipitously, stuffs the necklace in Reba's shopping bag, intending to remove it after they left the store. But the store's owner comes and says, hey, I need you to work late. So, hey, go ahead and go. I'll talk to you later. Okay. So now Reba does not know that the necklace is in her bag, right? She doesn't know, but she gets home. She's surprised to see it. She uncovers the diamond necklace, believing that the necklace had accidentally fallen into her bag while she was at Huffington's. She planned to return it the next day. The following day, however, she changes her mind and sold it to a friend for $1,000, a whole diamond necklace. That friend got a good deal. So Mona Lisa is guilty of, the correct answer is B, larceny, because she stole it. Even though the $1,000, it was sold for very undervalued. It is a diamond necklace, so it's not petty larceny. And it's not embezzlement, because if you look at what embezzlement is, that's when I give you that, the difference between a sales clerk in the lingerie department going over to the diamond necklace area and taking it, is that the Huffingtons never entrusted Mona Lisa with the goods that she kept. That's why it's not embezzlement. She went and stole it from the other department. Reba. Who wants to guess what Reba is guilty of?
Okay, it's not working.
So, I see a lot of C's. This one, is a neither. It's a D. Neither receiving stolen property or larceny. because she didn't ever have the mens rea, guys. Remember, she thought it was accidentally fallen into her bag. She didn't know it was stolen. She didn't know how it accidentally got into her bag. She was going to return it, but then sold it. So she didn't steal it because she didn't have the right mindset. And she didn't receive the stolen property because she didn't know that it was stolen or have reason to believe it was stolen, because it could have fallen accidentally into her purse. So that's thinking about things, right? And then the difference between, so if you have a kid working at a store and they're the cashier and they take money home, versus being someone who works in shoes and then going into a cash register and taking money, that's the difference for embezzlement, is that whether or not they. Okay, I'm going to answer some questions here. Isn't the action that counts when she knew she didn't buy it and but she still sold it? But she doesn't know how it got, so she doesn't know how it got in there. It could have been a gift from her girlfriend, right? And she could have said, oh, I might return it, but then she sells it. So does it matter that the person that she's selling this very expensive, let's look at a different way. The person that she sold it to for $1,000, that's very, very, very cheap for a diamond necklace. Do you think that person would have reasonable belief that it was stolen? I know I'm muted. I was yelling for a power cable. So the difference is what would the reasonable person believe, right? So is it reasonable to believe that your girlfriend who works at a department store could get you a gift and could sneak it in your bag? Nobody gets surprises like that? Nobody. That's the defense argument for Reba, is that, hey, she could have been, yes, gifts come packaged nicely, but I could have just been clever or thought I was being clever and slide it into your bag and surprise. So you have to look at what's reasonable, and that's right, Patrick, the burden of proof being on the prosecution to prove that. So that's why she's not guilty of the receiving stolen property. Now, if they were in on it together, she absolutely would be. Or if it was something that couldn't accidentally fall into her bag, or that's the other part. She believed it was an accidentally falling into her bag. She did not believe that someone stole it. So she didn't even bother asking if it was a gift. She just immediately sold it. Why would you do that? So that's the fun part about these fact patterns. Some people are doing crazy stuff and there's no real good reason, but the idea is that fact didn't weigh in on getting to the right answer. So Alondra, not necessarily. You have to look at which crime. So it's not that she just gets away with something. Okay. You have to look at it. What is she actually guilty of? It's like that Armando guy. Did he burglarize that garage? No, but he certainly attempted to arson the garage. So it's just something different. They're asking you to meet that's why it's important to look at the statutes, to look at what exactly are the elements and what you can charge and what you can't.
To tack on to that, you might want to look at the statute for robbery a little closely, because robbery requires something that's not in this fact pattern. So to actually rob someone, you need to have like an act of, I don't remember the statute exact word for word off the top of my head, but you need to have some kind of a violent act associated with it. Otherwise, it's just larceny. Use
Right.
of force, that's correct.
Yes, the use
So,
of force.
So here's the thing, you guys are all bringing up good points, and this is the thing you have to understand. Each side is going to argue differently. So the prosecution in this case is going to argue, well, you know, Reba may not have had any knowledge of the stolen gift or the gift immediately, but as soon as she, you know, she had the thought process that this wasn't her, so she needed to return to the store. And let's just say, you know, and then she decides, okay, well, you know, never mind, I'm going to sell it. The prosecution's going to make the argument she had the intent to return to the store initially, then she changed her mind and said, well, I'm going to sell it. That's the argument the prosecution's got to make, you know, if they're going to charge her with that. Whereas the defense is going to say exactly what Felicia said. So, you know, some of these things are, it's easy, it's harder to answer them. Listen, I hate writing essays, or at least I did. This is an easier essay question than it is a multiple choice, because you can explain both those points. Technically speaking, you know, there's nothing here for Reba, but you can make the argument on both sides. And as attorneys and peer counselors, that's what you're going to have to do. So it's good that you're thinking of both of these things, or both sides of this, because that's your job as attorneys, is to make those arguments.
So I agree 100%. And that's why I picked some of these, because I want them not necessarily to focus on what the actual answer is, but what can you argue as that person's peer counselor? What can you argue as the lawyer involved? What kind of questions are you thinking of? What can you come up with? Because it's about what kind of argument you can make and what you can prove, right? So it would be kind of hard on the prosecution, on the defense, to say, oh, well, it was totally accidental. They handed that to you in the question, but you would have to argue she had no idea. And then the prosecution's going to come back and say, oh, really? You didn't know? And I believe it was one of the chat questions. You turn around and sell it right away, and you don't even know if that's a gift from your girlfriend. Like, what kind of person would do that? That doesn't make any sense. So you got to use some of that thinking that you guys are doing, and you guys are doing a really good job. I'm really impressed by the way you're thinking about these questions. And that's what I was trying to get at when I talked about your why is most important, is that it's what you're thinking about that makes these questions really, really, I think, fun to play around with. You may not use the adjective fun, but I thought they were fun to play with, and argue both sides, because that's what lawyers need to be able to do, is argue both sides. Okay. So we've got Keith Kentworth. That's the next one, right? Keith Kentworth drove to Madison Square Garden to see the Westminster Dog Show. And he parked his car in the street 2 blocks away. When he was inside the arena, this gaudy character stole his car and drove to Coney Island. He planned, so his intent is to take the car to a deserted warehouse and strip the vehicle. While he was driving the car, the brakes suddenly failed and the auto veered out of control. So it jumped the sidewalk, crashed into a home owned by Eva, causing extensive damage. So he was arrested and charged with larceny. Okay, so that's the stealing of the car, and the separate crime of malicious destruction of property. At trial, the prosecution and defense both stipulated that the malfunctioning of the car's brakes caused it to veer out of control and damage Eva's home. So he didn't purposely veer into the house. So if you're convicted of larceny for the theft of the car, that's kind of obvious. With respect to the second charge of malicious destruction of property, what is he guilty of? Or is he guilty of? I got some A's and some C's. I'm going to give it a little bit of, kind of a multiple of them. So I'm seeing a lot of C's and D's. So some guilties. I saw a few A's in there. So the difference would be the malicious, whether or not he needs the malicious requirement, or whether the malice can be inferred from the intent to steal or the general intent. So the correct answer is A, because the offenses are separate and apart, so you cannot transfer intent. So this is not transferred intent like shooting the gun or reaching out your fist to hit one person and accidentally hitting the other. The intent was to commit the battery. So the intent goes behind the crime. So if you intend to do one thing, remember he laid out what he was going to do with the car. He never intended to either specifically crash into Eva's house or drive maliciously enough to have foreseeable consequences, like that whole driving on the sidewalk, driving the wrong way on the 95 examples. He would have made it free and clear to Coney Island and stripped the car, but for the manufacturer's default. So he doesn't have any intent for the separate crime to transfer over. So you can't take the intent to commit the larceny and make it into a whole nother crime. That's why it's A. Okay. But it looks like a lot of you got that. So that kind of wraps up. Wait, I think there's one more. Yeah. There's going to be one more on criminal law, and then we're going to move over to criminal procedure, seeing that it's already noon. So this is Mallory and Tinker. They agreed. So it sounds like there's a conspiracy here. Let's see what happens. To burglarize Rosario's home while they were planning it out, another conspiracy word. Mallory informed Tinker that Rosario's home had sophisticated alarm system and would need to be disarmed. Enter Blick. Okay, so I'm getting some answers already, and D seems very popular, that Tinker, Mallory, and Blick are guilty of both conspiracy and attempted burglary. Okay, Mitch feels very strongly about D. Or are you just hitting the enter button a bunch of times? So for this one, since we've gone over a bunch of times, Mitch, do you want to unmute yourself and tell us why you hit D? Before I reveal the correct answer. Okay, Mitch, tell me about D.
You can unmute yourself and talk, Mitch. I guess Mitch doesn't want to talk.
Okay. I see that you're saying, I guess you can't unmute, but you're saying they were all thinking about conspiracy for burglary. They made a plan to rob Rosario's. Was Blink part of, okay. Was Blink part of the plan to rob Rosario's house? Because I'm showing that he shouldn't be charged with attempted because he did not go with them to rob the house. So in order to get the attempted burglary, you have to be able, so Mitch, why do you think that, let's go with specifically Blick, is the attempted burglary? You told me that they planned together. Why do you think? Okay. I can't hear you. Oh, you don't have a mic. Oh, okay. Okay, so then you're going to say they're all conspiracy, they're all guilty of conspiracy and attempted burglary, and you saying because they planned together, is that what you're saying? Okay, so McKenna says it's B because Blick helped them conspire but didn't take the substantial step. And I'm going to tell you that, McKenna, you are absolutely right. And all those people who are, I think the up arrow means you agree with what she's saying. He is part of the conspiracy because they couldn't have disarmed that alarm without his information, right? So that makes him guilty of conspiracy because he did help with the plan. He told them how to do it, okay? But he didn't want to do it. So we didn't get that attempt that is substantial. He didn't take the step with them. So they are, the three of them are guilty of conspiracy. And it's for what? So he was not a part of the crime with Tinker and Mallory. He was part of the conspiracy, but not the attempt. Oh, good answer, Angel. Disarming the alarm is absolutely vital to the burglary. Can everybody see what Angel wrote? Because that's the right answer. That's okay. I know everyone's talking about Blick. It's a funny name. Who names their kid Blick? Okay, so that's the last criminal law one. Now we're going to start talking about the criminal procedures stuff. And we have about 40 minutes to do that. Okay, so I pronounced this name Smelson. Was employed by the B&O Railroad Company as a watchman. I didn't know they had watchmen at railroads, but here we go. His job is warning the public of approaching trains. Late one evening, he fell asleep and failed to warn of the approach of an oncoming train. So Fishbone, who was driving along his car, knew of the usual presence of the watchman. He knew the guy is usually there. He approached the crossing, received no warning. So he drove onto the track and he was struck and crushed by the train. He died, unfortunately, instantly. A few minutes after the accident, the police arrive and enter the little shack and ask him, or see him, and he woke up. What happened here? And then Smelson made some incriminating statements. He is subsequently charged with involuntary manslaughter. His motion to prevent the introduction of his incriminating statements into evidence. So he wants to prevent them from coming in to evidence. So this is a protection against self-incrimination, right? So what's important to know from the gate on this one is that if a police officer just walks up to you and starts asking you questions and you involuntarily start telling them stuff, it's different than when, remember what I told you about Ernesto Miranda? Okay, Angel, you got it right again. Remember I told you about Ernesto Miranda, all those things he said when he was inside the car, the police car? So what you have to have in order for Miranda to apply is questioning. So that happened in custody. So he wasn't, it's right, Alonda, he wasn't arrested. He was free to go. He didn't have to say anything. He could say, what are you talking about? And get up and walk away because he doesn't know yet if he didn't put him under arrest. He didn't put him, and in custody means inside the car. It could mean handcuffed on the side of the road. The person has to be detained in some way and feel like they're not free to go anywhere. So that's the huge difference. And that's what this question highlights. So the correct answer is C, because what the important is the prerequisites to the admissibility of the statements. It has to be during a custodial interrogation.
So Felicia, do I have to be under arrest for Miranda to apply, or can it apply even if I'm not actually arrested?
You don't have to be under arrest. You have to be in custody. So like, that's kind of what I was going over. There's a bunch of different ways that can happen, but the guy could have left his little shanty shed anytime that he wanted to. He could have walked away. It was just a conversation at that point. The officer didn't put handcuffs on him. He didn't restrict him in any way. He didn't remove him from where he was standing. He didn't put him in the car. He didn't put him under arrest. All of those things could be considered. None of that stuff happened. It was just, I walked up to you and started talking to you. So Juan has a question. Doesn't the police consider the beginning of custody at the point of arrest? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, Juan, because I can put you, you're not under arrest, but I can go ahead and put you, so finding some place else to talk. If you don't feel, if I put you in the back of a police car, I haven't actually put you under arrest yet, but you are in custody now. And that's where Ernesto Miranda was when he was being driven. He was in the back of a car. So that's why they're big on, if a police person if a police officer puts you in the back of the car and starts asking you questions, that's considered in custody without the full arrest. If here in Nevada, there's also some situations which have become what we call case law, which is how we define certain words. So custody could also be, and you guys have probably maybe seen this driving around Las Vegas, where you see police pull someone over and they're in handcuffs sitting on the curb. That is also considered in custody. You're not fully arrested down to a police station, but you certainly can't get up and walk away. So that is kind of what that's making sure that it's not just that everything, you don't have to say anything. It has to be questions while you're while you're in custody.
Juan brought up a really good point, Felicia. I just want to bring it up quickly. I know we're kind of getting close on time, but you're right. The police would probably consider the beginning custody of the point of arrest, but that doesn't mean that the person who they're questioning is going to feel that way. And that's where a lot of cases come down to, is whose perception of custody counts. So the police are always going to err on the side of, I can ask you questions all day long, but if that person feels like they were, let's just say they have 3 cops surrounding them, they're not in handcuffs, they're not in a closed room, but they don't feel like they can just walk away, there's an argument there that they were in a custodial setting. So and there's no real cut and dry answer. Constitutional law with things like this is very subjective. So it really just depends on the answer or the perception and how you argue it. So I don't know if you want to add to that at all, Felicia. I just want to bring that up. It's a really good question.
No, it is, because that's part of the answer, is that it's not in custody. So being in his workplace, but he was not in custody. Does that make sense? He's being questioned. You can even consider what happened here, even if you don't find that an interrogation, he's still not in custody. So you need both pieces. Okay, so now guys, we're moving through this pretty fast. Now we're on 15 with Leach, who lives at 789 Mesa Drive in a residential section of Tucson. The police receive reliable information that he has a stolen Yamaha stereo in his possession. Tucson detectives go get an affidavit to a neutral magistrate, judge. That's a nice word for judge. They get a search warrant, making a determination of probable cause. The magistrate say, yes, go get the Yamaha stereo on the premises on 789 Mesa Drive. The police arrive at his dwelling, show him the warrant, come inside. So while they're there, they notice a Sanyo stereo, which had the serial number removed. Upon further inspection, the police determined that the Sanyo stereo has been stolen from a local Federated store during a recent burglary. Then they place him under arrest and instruct him to remain seated in the living room so they're restricting his movements While they're searching the rest of the home, one of the officers proceed to the basement where she found the stolen Yamaha stereo. She then decides to search upstairs and came across a stolen Mataran's stereo in his second floor bedroom. So they're like, hey, he gets prosecuted for receiving stolen property. And he wants to prevent the introduction of all 3 stereos. So his motion, he should be allowed to keep out either the Sanyo stereo, the Mataraz stereo, and the Sanyo, or should all of them come in? And I'm getting some B's, some C's, some D's. So should all of them come in or should some of them come in? So the correct answer here is C, the Manarans and the stereos and the Sanyo stereo. So we're gonna take it piece by piece and I'll show you why. They went into this house. They had the correct house. They were looking for the Yamaha. That was what was in the warrant. They saw a Sanyo stereo, but remember they had to do further inspection for the Sanyo stereo. And the Mataran stereo was found after the Yamaha stereo. That is why once you find what you're looking for, you're done. Does that make sense? Why keep going when you found what you were there to get? They only had the warrant for the Yamaha stereo. That's why the 3rd stereo is no good. The 1st stereo they find before the Yamaha stereo, they had to further inspect it. They had him there. They could have gotten a warrant to inspect for another stereo. It doesn't say any stereo, it says a Yamaha stereo. Does that make sense? It's the further inspection for the 1st, and it's the fact that they found what they were looking for. So you can't just keep looking for more stuff, for more crimes. It's not that forgiving. Does that make
So
sense?
I saw Juan brought up the plain view exception or the plain view doctrine.
Mhm.
I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So the plain view doctrine or exception doesn't apply to the Sanyo stereo because they had to do more research on whether it was stolen or not. Now, if they had walked in and the police had seen, 2 pounds of cocaine, okay, they know what cocaine looks like. That's pretty illegal. They don't have to do any more research to know that shouldn't be there and that's illegal. That would be the plain view exception. But because they had to look at the Sanyo stereo and do some more research on that, the plain view exception does not apply there.
Or, flip it around. What if they found the Marantz stereo first while they were looking for the Sanyo stereo? That's the plain view right there. But there's also exceptions to that too. It depends on plain views. You really got to know them looking for more info and having to call it in and things like that. That's where it changes a little bit.
That's kind of why we get plain view. It has to be plain. It has to be
Obvious.
Very
something that's
obvious.
like back when marijuana was illegal and you found a bong and marijuana sitting next together, you know what that is. It's not something it has to be obvious, I guess the word is. So if you're a policeman who is in search warrants, you're going to have more experience and knowledge. So that's why she's using that cocaine example. To all of us who don't see cocaine on a regular basis, some of these questions may come to our mind, like, is that sugar? Is that flour? But a police officer finding something in plain view, they're saying, and you'll see that when when you look at possession charges for trial by peers, it'll say based on my experience, I knew this to be marijuana. Okay, because it looks like marijuana, smells like marijuana. Like if you walk in and the whole house smells like marijuana and it's sitting right there on the coffee table, then that's plain view. Has to be obvious. So what's obvious to police is a little bit different in terms of drugs than what's obvious to the regular person who doesn't use drugs. So you can all pat yourselves on the back that it's confusing to us because we don't use drugs, right? Okay. After Leach and his stereos comes Wayne Wilson in the airport. Now he had some cocaine in his satchel. He didn't challenge the search because the airport's one of those places like school that you have a little bit lower expectation. And he was prosecuted for possession of cocaine. At trial, he testified in his own behalf and said that it belonged to his girlfriend, Jerry Martin, who was with him at the time he was arrested. But later she died in a skydiving accident because she was skydiving. He also testified that although he was a former cocaine addict, he had not used any drugs in the past 3 years. So on cross-exam, the prosecuting attorney says, oh yeah, well, roll up your sleeves and let me see if there's any needle marks. Does Wayne Wilson have to show his arms? I see some. Let me give you a minute to see. Alondra, do you want to explain why you have D with two exclamation points? I love the exclamation points.
Yeah, so I truly believe that it's D because like not trying to discredit like drug addicts and stuff, but most of them do have like a tendency to lie to cover their drug like addiction. So just showing his sleeve, he's not in danger, like it's nothing wrong. They just want to see if he's being honest or not. Which by the way, like by the scars that he might have, it can change the whole story of Wilson. It could prove that it was his and he was using it, or that it was his girlfriend, because his girlfriend is not there to defend herself. So yeah, I mean, Martin isn't there to defend herself, if that makes sense.
So you're absolutely right. The correct answer is D. And it is for some of the fancy word for what you're talking about is credibility. So when you have a witness on the stand, you're allowed to test his credibility or bias. So it's like impeachment. So how you would have it come up in trial by peers, if you were in trial, you would say they all gave, if you had a witness statement, you know how we saw the statements in Ronald Small's case, and it said one thing, but they're saying something else, you could bring it up to show their credibility, okay? So I get a lot, there's a lot of questions about self-incrimination, right? About, don't we have the Fifth Amendment right to not to incriminate ourselves, okay? So that is a very limited right. That right applies to evidence that's testimonial in nature. So that's statements. That's why we always think about it. Every time we talk about self-incrimination, it's about what statements that you have made. So he's not asking to make statements at this point, okay? And when you say I have the right not to answer that question, to not incriminate myself, that doesn't mean to show that I'm being a liar or not. That's to show whether or not I committed a crime. So the only statements are underneath those. And when credibility is the real key here, because he's trying to say, hey, I know I was a cocaine addict and I know you found me with cocaine, but I swear it wasn't mine. Well, if that's his defense, then the jury has to believe him. And if he says other things that are unbelievable or are not credible, then they can make a determination on what the other things that he's saying and whether or not that's believable. So you can always attack a witness's credibility. That's why it's tricky when you have a client or someone who wants to take the stand and tell their own story in their own defense, they're subject to cross-examination like this. Anything you say, you can get cross-examined on. So if you say, I haven't used drugs in 3 years, you're subject to additional examination on that. So even though the big things, you know, if you're straight out asked, did you do it? You can say no. There's other pieces of what you're saying that can be cross-examined.
So Felicia, what if Wilson just testifies that, you know, it's his girlfriend's purse and it's not his, it's his girlfriend's, and he doesn't bring up the fact that, you know, he was a cocaine user, but now he's been clean for 3 years. Can the prosecution still ask him to roll up his sleeves for the needle marks?
Okay, so if he doesn't say that,
He doesn't bring up the fact that he was a cocaine user. His only testimony is that it's not my satchel, it's my girlfriend's. It's not mine. You can't charge me with it.
okay, so so the fact that he was a former cocaine addict is not in evidence either.
Correct. He did not bring up the fact that he used cocaine before at all.
Right. Then whether or not he had, then the question would become, since it's not towards his credibility, what would be the relevance
Right. Can the
of him
prosecution
having needle marks?
ask him to roll up his sleeves?
Right? Why is he asking him? It comes back
Right.
to what you're going to introduce it for. So if you're introducing it to attack his credibility, it's okay. If you're not, if he never said any of that stuff, then why would it be relevant? It would be irrelevant. And
Right.
I think I don't want to go too far into that because I know that Mike does that whole thing, right? Next week. But you're right. You're looking at why. You always have to be looking at why the evidence is being presented to the trier of fact, in this case, the jury. Okay. All right. Would they test for fingerprints on the cocaine satchel? They would, but he was caught holding it. So I bet his fingerprints would be on it. Oh, someone else answered that. Okay.
You go to the next question, Felicia. I'll tell you guys what. If you guys want a preview for next week, and you guys are, I'll give you the link to the Discord at the end. If you guys want to talk about that whole witness question exam, we'll talk about it in Discord because there's about 17 ways you can attack that, and I'll have fun doing it because I like messing with witnesses. So there's a preview.
Okay. That sounds good. Okay, so guys, we only have 4 more questions and I only have 30 minutes to do it. Great. So we're at the Bridgeport Police Department files a complaint charging Bruce Gray with the sale of narcotic drugs in violation of the statutes and have a valid search warrant for his arrest. Okay. They go to his house. It's 2 stories. And after knocking at the door, they were allowed in by a man who says he is Lloyd Gray, Bruce Gray's brother. Okay. And so he says, oh, I'm just watching the house while my brother's away on a business trip. They ask him for ID. He's only able to produce an out-of-state driver's license that says Lloyd Gray. Then they become suspicious and they decide to frisk him. And during the pat down, they find a letter that says, Dear Lloyd, if you can get rid of Bruce permanently, we could be together forever. With love, Jennifer. So can I just interject here? If you are going to murder with someone else, do not put it in writing, okay? Just free legal advice. So then Lloyd agrees to allow the policeman to search his house, search the house, not his brother's house. They conduct an extensive 2-hour search and find 0 interesting stuff. As they're leaving, the officer walks over to a parked car in the driveway and notices the trunk was slightly open. When he looks in the trunk, he discovers the body of the brother. So now they want to keep the letter from coming into evidence. Is the letter allowed in or not, and why? Okay. I like your answer. I say this because he's not the person that lived there, so he's suspicious to me. So I'm never going to ask you to watch my house for me because apparently everybody who's house sitting is suspicious. So I saw a few of the correct answers, so I want to pick this apart. And this is something that we touched on lightly in the video, but the correct answer is that it is not allowed into evidence because the letter was the fruit of the illegal search and seizure. Remember we talked about the exclusionary rule. So you have to look at how to go all the way back. How did you get the letter? They had the valid search warrant for some drugs on Bruce. They did not, it had nothing to do with Lloyd, okay? And he was able to produce a license that said Lloyd Gray. It was out of state, but he didn't say where he was from. He said he was watching the house for his brother, okay? They just decide to become suspicious and frisk him. So that is, you can't just frisk somebody. You can't just become suspicious. There was nothing going on there. So that's why it is the fruit of an illegal search, because you have the right. You didn't have any probable cause, any reason to believe. There's nothing to suggest why that guy got suspicious and decided to frisk this guy. He said he was the brother. He gave a name. He gave an ID that matched the name that wasn't from, he said he didn't live at this house. He had an ID that says he didn't live at that house. There's nothing suspicious there. So I want to answer, isn't C and D the same thing? It's different because it's the fruit is what they actually found. And it's not, it's technically correct. It's not admissible. It's the, not the right reason. So remember I told you the reason is why. The reason you would exclude it is because it's the fruit of a product of the legal search rather than a non-consensual search, okay? It's a little different, little nuance.
Is you can have a non-consensual search, but that doesn't mean it's a violation of, you know, how do I explain this? So if I'm a criminal and I got drugs on me, I don't want the cops to search me, but if it's a legal search, it doesn't matter if I consent to it or not.
And I think Victoria brings up a really good point. The purpose of a frisk is to check for the officer's safety. So if they are frisking and they feel a knife and they know it's a knife by feel, that's fine. But if they're frisking and they just feel something, they're like, I want to know what this is. And they don't know what it is just by feel, they can't take it out and look at it. So a frisk is there to protect the officer, not to find, you know, things to incriminate the person with.
Right. So that makes it a little bit different. So you want to be able to be focused on what the police, what the problem was. So that was the problem. Okay. So on to Smirk, who, I love the name of this guy because I could keep seeing him with a face. So Smirk's standing on the street corner and the officer approaches him and gently grabs his arm and says, hey, I want to talk to you. And the Smirk guy goes, about what? I'm in a hurry to go home and watch some TV. He likes the Phillies. I don't know if that's going to matter later or not. So then the officer says, hey, what were you doing at Lefty's liquor store last Saturday night? Then the guy says, all right, man, I was there during the robbery. And the police officer says, thank you for doing my job for me. I'm placing you under arrest and charging you with robbery. So Smirk's taken to the police headquarters where he's booked for the first time. He's given his Miranda warnings. He then waives his rights and confesses to being an accessory during the liquor store robbery. So later he gets the court appoints an attorney to represent Smirk. And the attorney says that both statements that Smirk gave to the police should not come into evidence. The judge grants the request as to the first statement, okay? Now he says the second statement given at police reporters should also not come into evidence. And I'm getting some strong D answers on this one. Let me see. So I'm going to pull the last one. Victoria, do you want to unmute and say why you said D?
Yeah, I said D because the first time he wasn't under the impression of whether he could leave under arrest. When we mentioned earlier that if you feel like you can't leave freely, then you're under arrest, he didn't feel that. He voluntarily gave up his statement and confessed. And so with that, the officer had probable cause to arrest him, and he was arrested and booked. And then he was given his Miranda warnings. After he was given his Miranda warnings, he waived his rights and then confessed again. So he made another statement. So the request was not granted because the second statement was volunteered. The first statement is not going to be allowed because it was before his Miranda.
You're absolutely right. And you said it exactly. He volunteered this statement. So you have the right not to incriminate yourself, but you also have the right to incriminate yourself and make a confession if that's what you want to do. So after he was given all of his warnings, he decides to give a confession. There's no evidence that this could be beaten out of him or anything like that. So he wanted to get it off his chest and volunteered the information for the police. So it's absolutely comes into evidence and absolutely will be used against him when they go to trial, because, and you absolutely pointed out the difference why the first statement does not come in and why the second statement does. So good job. And I saw that a lot of people also got that same answer. So good. We're really getting the difference between those now. So that's really good. Okay. Let's talk about our friend Herman. He is a pre-med student at Slippery Rock University. I'm sure that's a great university. Okay, let me just stop really quick and answer Alondra's question that he was arrested based on that first statement. The probable cause doesn't go away for the arrest just because the statement doesn't come in, but he was then brought down to the police station. He was booked. He was read his warnings and told anything that you will say will be used against you. And after being told all of those things, he volunteered it. So that's why it's okay. Even though he was arrested because of the first statement and they're not going to use the first statement, the answer is still D, like dog, because he was volunteered after the knowing Miranda waiver. So even without the first statement, you can still use the second statement because he made a waiver of his rights. Okay. So we're going to look at Herman at the University of Slippery Rock. Guess what? Another football question. And you thought football wasn't in your lives. Here we go. He attended a prep rally at University Football Field. During the prep rally, the students drank beer, sang songs, gave members of the football team reverent cheers. They were very happy. After he ended, he was walking towards his car when he needed to take a leak. And then he started across the street to a park and peed against a tree. In this jurisdiction, peeing in public is a misdemeanor. Unknown to him, there's a meter maid who was ticketing cars in the area, witnessed the incident, wrote down the license number of the vehicle as he drove off. She gave the information to the police, who did a check, found him. Within an hour, they were at his house. It's a small town, so apparently they got lots of time to catch urinators, public urinators. They forcibly entered the dwelling without a search warrant. While searching his house, they found him studying in an upstairs bedroom after giving, within an hour, he's already back upstairs studying after the pep rally. I guess that's the life of a pre-med student, guys. After giving him his Miranda warnings, he confessed. So he's prosecuted for the misdemeanor of urinating in public. He wants the statement that he made to the police when he was arrested to be not allowed at trial. So that's called suppressing it. That's when you, even though he said it, you're not going to use it as evidence. So when he made the statement when he was apprehended, should the request be denied or granted, allowing the statement to come? If it's denied, then the statement will come in. If it's granted, then the statement will not come in. Oh, I get a lot of D's. I'm gonna pick one from random and see what you're at. Siri, can you unmute yourself and tell me why you picked D? Oh, your mic isn't working. So can you type your answer really quick why you would pick D? Okay. I'm going to give you a little more time. You might be typing and I can't tell. Go through the answers. Okay. You actually changed your mind. Okay. Well, never mind then. What do you think it is now? Just type the answer, the letter you think it is, and we'll talk about which one it is. Kind of think it's B, that it should be denied because he volunteered the confession. So this goes back, the correct answer, you were right the first time. Never second guess your answers, I guess. That's one of those test taking rules. The motion should be granted because his statement was part of the warrantless entry of his home. So this is the taint of the fruit of the poisonous tree, the fruit of the illegal searches and seizures is admissible. So the fact that they busted into his house, remember what they said? Forcibly entered the dwelling without a search warrant. While searching his home, they found him. So they are coming in with force without a warrant for a misdemeanor. And then don't give him his Miranda right warnings until, so how does that make it different, right? So as a result of their illegal warrantless search of the home, his confession will be properly excluded under the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. So because they came forcibly into his home and was searching, then the confession is considered part of the fruit, like the letter would be from that other question. So that's just to kind of play with. By the time he wasn't brought down to the station and booked and done all that stuff and then gave his confession. He was being forcibly, he's sitting in his house and forcibly entered, and then they're searching without any sort of warrant or anything. And the guy, there was time to get a warrant. So that's what makes it different than getting your Miranda warnings while you're after you've been processed in jail. Okay. So number 20, our last one. On Tuesday, the Riverside Police Department received information from a reliable informant that Keller would be extorting some money from Gelson on Friday. So the informant gave the police explicit details about the extortion scheme. The informant said that Keller would be calling Gelson from a public phone booth on the corner of Grove and Spring Street at 3 p.m. on Friday to make the extortionist demand. Without notifying the telephone company of seeking a warrant, the Riverside Police installed an eavesdropping device on the public phone. At 3 p.m. on Friday, Keller telephoned Gelson from the phone booth and said, "You better pay me $5,000 by next Wednesday or I'll kill you and your family." Keller provided additional details about how and where to make the payoff. So based on the taped conversation, the police arrested Keller and charged him with extortion. But now Keller's attorney requests to disallow the taped conversation to come into evidence. So is that going to be granted or denied? And what I thought was funny is $5,000 is not a lot of money to kill somebody's whole family. So this Keller guy must be pretty desperate. That's what I thought. But anyway, I digress. So what does everyone think it is? I see a lot of D's. Anyone think it's anything else? So D would be denied because the police had probable cause based on the information supplied by the informant. Does everybody thinks it's D? Or does anyone else? What?
A couple people think it's A.
Oh, okay. Oh, now I get some more A's. So the correct answer here is A. Any form of electronic surveillance, including wiretapping, that violates a reasonable expectation of privacy constitutes a search. So you need a valid warrant authorizing any form of electronic surveillance, including wiretapping. Choice A is correct because a neutral magistrate, a judge, must approve a warrant authorizing the electronic surveillance. So get a warrant and you can listen. If you don't get a warrant before installing the eavesdropping device, you're not going to get it. So Ash, the difference is, you ask a good question. Isn't probable cause enough because they risk losing evidence? And there is that extenuating circumstances clause about losing evidence, but look at the facts they gave you. The information they got from a reliable, so it's good information on Tuesday. So when you look at questions like that, you have to wonder, why are they giving me this much information besides it's fun to think about? On Tuesday, they're told that there's going to be some extortion going on Friday. So the law presumes that between Tuesday and Friday, that's 3 business days, you could get a warrant off that good information. So even if it's probable cause, it's probable cause to get a valid warrant. So go ahead and get that warrant. You, since it's not going to happen for 3 days, there's no real risk to losing the evidence because you have enough time to get the warrant before the evidence is lost. And that's important. So, wow, we got 6 minutes. I'm really happy with how all of you guys are participating this week. I know some of these questions were really tricky. I thought you guys gave it a good, really, really good attempt at kind of the whole point was to get you, not necessarily to get to the right answer, but to introduce you to kind of the way lawyers think, how to think like a lawyer. That's big. If you intend to go to law school, they're going to train you on how to do it, but this is important to get you to think about what facts are important, why are you seeking these facts out, what certain things matter and what certain things don't. So great job for this week. And I don't know, Mike, if you want to give them you already kind of gave them a sample of what we're doing next week, but I'm good. That's all I had.
Next week is about evidence. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. It's your primer on how to start getting things in and prove your case. So, go ahead, Felicia.
I was just going to answer Patrick's question because that's a good question. Some of these things will come up as you are in trial. I just wanted to give you an introduction to them and get you thinking about this might come into play later on. It might not. And then you would lean on your senior attorneys to help you kind of ferret out, is the Plainview Doctrine going to be important for my case? Does it apply in my case? I just wanted you guys to be aware of what some of these are and what they mean so that you will suspect it coming up. No one's going to expect you while you're doing trial by peers to know 100% of this. It's just to give you enough information that if it comes up, I can't say 100% it will, and I can't say 100% it won't because I don't know what kind of cases are coming up. But I have seen these types of issues throughout going through trials with trial by peers. So I want to make sure you had at least an introduction to it so that you would know enough to question about whether or not it applies. So you may see that as you go along.
Yeah, talking to the senior attorney is good advice because most of these things are going to happen while at school, so you have a lower expectation of privacy in school than you would in the real world. But definitely be thinking about it. I've seen a case got thrown out because of Miranda, plain and simple. Prosecution tossed that out because they found out later the kid couldn't understand English very well. The officer gave him his Miranda warnings all in English, and they ended up tossing the case out. So it's definitely something that comes up. I'm not going to lecture too long. Just good luck for next week. I'm posting a link to our Discord server in there. So there's categories in there about homework, about just you guys can talk to each other. You can talk to us. There's a section in there just to ask us lawyer questions if you want. So Felicia, Lexi, and I will be, we monitor it. We all have it on our phones. We have it on our computers. So we can talk to you guys about that. There's voice chat channels if you guys want to get in there and compare notes about the homework or anything. So feel free to jump in there and connect to it. Just make sure there's a note stickied in there to change your name to your real name so we can see you and not your username. But yeah, go ahead and use that. And you can talk to us in there about stuff. Otherwise, all I got to say is have a good weekend. And then you should be getting the homework, I believe, on Monday. I'll let Katya and Patrick chime in on that. And if you got any questions, just reach out and talk to us.
Real quick before Patrick and Katya come in, I know you guys had some questions on the week 2 video handouts. I just want to reiterate, I know those are important. We didn't get to those just because the homework was pretty beefy this week. Email us those questions, put them in the Discord in the homework questions channel. Those handouts are important. They're going to act as your outlines for when it's time to study for your mini bar exam at the end of the course. So it's important to have those answers correct. So make sure you ask them one way or another. Layla had a question. Don't DM us if you have a question. Post it in one of the channels, because if you have it, there's a good chance that other people have it too. There's 60 some of you in this class. You guys are going to have repeat questions. So if you have a question, post it in the channel. That's all I have to say. So Patrick, Katya, go ahead.
If you have anything.
Yeah, if you have anything.
How about the question about just put up all the answers and let them check their own after they've completed it? The problem with that is that not everybody's turning in their homework, and I want to be able to talk about why the answer, because it's important, why the answer is the correct answer. So if you, we went through and identified the questions that most people have, and we're able to at least give you the right answers for those ones and talk about why it's important. Because it'll be a study guide, but if you don't if we just give you the answers and you don't understand why, or if you didn't try to go through it on your own the first hand, you're not learning it, so that when it comes up on the little exam, you're not as prepared. That's the teacherly answer for that. We want to be able to discuss the why.
Yep.
All right, thank you, everyone. We, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're okay. I was going to say it also helps to figure out if there are areas that a lot of people are having problems with, so that we can discuss them in more detailed terms. That's all.
Right. Thank you, everyone. I will be sending out the assignments for next week on Monday. If you have any questions, you can message me. If it's questions about the program, if it's questions about the program, member to Discord or CCLF training. And please keep putting in your email signature, your full name. I have a lot of repeat names and it takes me a while to find out who's sending me what. Always put in an email signature. And that's all I have.
All right. Everyone, have a good weekend. Email, Discord, all that good stuff, and we will see you next week.
Good work, guys.
And thank you, Felicia.